everybody, welcome to week 2 of the 4-week Kickstart program, and we are focusing right now on legs. So this week we will be focusing on quads, hamstrings, glutes, and how all of that affects the body as a whole, your back and spine health. Today, the very first thing we're going to focus on is squats. There are a ton of variations that you can do when it comes to squatting form, depth, range of motion, and different stances. So I, of course, want to cover how to do that in a way that's going to be best for your body specifically, and ways that you can modify or adjust, and why you would need to do that if you start feeling things like hip pain or knee pain, or if you're having a hard time keeping or maintaining a full range of motion. So let's get to it right now and talk about the squats. So as you begin to move your lower body, it's really important to think and pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're doing a particular movement and you feel tightness or a pinching sensation through the front of the hips, or if you feel any kind of pulling through the inside or the outside of your knees, it's a really good time to assess your form just to see what's going on and if you need to make some changes to your stance. Everybody's bodies are built differently, and women specifically tend to have wider hips than men do. This might mean that you have to modify your squat stance just a little bit in order for you to move in a way that's going to be effective and injury preventative for your body specifically. Now, one of the ways that we can squat is to think about having a narrow stance. So a narrow stance squat is going to be something where your feet fall directly under the hip width. Now, this can be a tricky one, and it might be a little bit more tricky for beginners because it's hard to feel like this is going to be a movement where you're not going to fall over backwards, or you're not going to put too much weight into your toes. So really feel this one out, and I always recommend when adding in a new move, you can start with 1/4 of the rep or even maybe 1/2 of the range of motion just to see how your body's going to do with it. So when we're doing a narrow squat, which is going to potentially work the quads a little bit more than like the hamstrings and the glutes, well, we want to think about tracking where your knees go. So we don't want them to dive in or out. We want them to stay in one plane here the entire time. So if I'm coming down into my squat, I'm going to press through my heels to return to standing, pressing through the back half of my foot. My entire foot will stay on the ground with contact from my heel to my toes. But I want to think about pressing more of my weight back through the back half of my foot and into my heels rather than forward. And the reason being, once we start diving into the front, we're putting a little bit more strain on the kneecaps themselves. So just to keep your body healthy and moving in the right direction, think about keeping that weight behind you. So you're going to come down into your squat, knees are going to stay in one spot, not diving in or out, and then you're going to press up. So from the side, that narrow squat, come down, sit the hips back, and then press up. Again, where you're using the backs of the legs and the glutes, keeping the weight through the heels. Now, this might be a little bit trickier. I know that you'll probably hear people talking about getting all the way down to 90 or below 90 degrees, referring to the bend in the knee. Now, that's tricky to do with a narrow squat unless you're using the assistance of maybe a ball against the wall to come all the way down. That way you don't have to hold your body upright, but that's a little bit more advanced. So today we're just going to focus on that basic narrow squat, down, play around with your range of motion. If you have the opportunity, do this in front of the mirror as you get adjusted to how you are feeling things are moving, right? So that proprioception of where your body is moving and how those mechanics are going. So use a mirror if you can. Then we can just widen it out. Now you want to think about wherever your knees go, your toes want to follow. So instead of having your toes pointed in here, we want to have them just slightly pointed out as we widen the stance just beyond hip width apart. So again, you're going to engage the core, shoulders are back, nice upright posture, right? We're not going to bend way forward here. So nice upright posture. Come down, again, keeping in mind where those knees are, not letting them come in or out. Sitting back, and this is from the side, toes slightly pointed out, core is strong, shoulders back, down and up, down and up. Again, my weight is primarily through the back half of my foot instead of through my toes. You'll also know that you're doing that the correct way if at times you almost feel like you're going backwards. Then you know that you're putting that in the right spot. And when you're looking at this from a profile, maybe you're recording yourself or you have a mirror, make sure you're not coming down here and hinging at the hips instead of at the hips and the knees. So it's going to be a combination of those things. We can also move into some plie squats or sumo squats where the feet are more externally rotated out, the toes are going to be pointed out, the knees are going to follow that plane of motion. And when you come down, again, those knees are going to come in or out, staying nice and tight in one spot, bringing the glutes down towards the ground, and then we're going to press through the heels to return to center. So what happens as you're doing these movements is that you are changing the primary targeted muscle. So you might just be still working the lower body, but instead of working primarily the quads or the glutes, you're now turning that focus to the inner thighs, so we're working on strength there as well. So please remember when you're doing these, if you're feeling any discomfort through your hips, or if you feel discomfort through your knees or the outside of your leg, just widen your stance. You can test out to see what angle is going to be preferred by your body. Again, depending on how wide your hips are and how your femur sits into your actual pelvis, you might have to change that up. So play around with it a little bit. If you do a squat, doesn't feel comfortable, widen your stance just a little bit. Make sure that you follow the toes. So if the knees are coming out, the toes are going to come out as well. Should form almost a straight line from the angle of your hip, your knee, and your toes. So that's a good general rule of thumb to use when doing squats. Easily one of the biggest go-tos outside of squats when it comes to lower body movements is going to be deadlifts. So this is a really good way at strengthening the core as a whole, also working the hamstrings and the glutes. This is also one of those areas that if your mechanics aren't right, if your form is incorrect, or you get lazy or you go too heavy, you're at risk for back injuries and for other problems. So this one's really important that if you haven't spent a lot of time doing this, please be mindful and please be very aware of where your body is. So there's a couple really good rules of thumbs to just keep in mind when you're doing deadlifts. For one, you can do it with a narrow stance. You'll also, as you progress, you'll see some people go toes in or toes out, or even widen that stance and have more of a bend at the knee. For the basic, we're going to talk more about a straight leg deadlift. So that's going to be with the feet at the base of the hips, so just hip width apart. So before you even load up with weight for this movement, I want you to think about your posture and what your core is doing. So the most important thing here is to roll the shoulders back, lead with the chest, flatten the entire back nice and long, and then create that intra-abdominal pressure here. So you've got a nice tight core, just like if you were bracing for somebody to come up and slap you in the stomach, okay? So you're gonna create that pressure, not doing so in a way that's gonna keep you from breathing, right? Because now I'm bearing down this entire time and still able to have a conversation with you. So you're just gonna hold tight as you're bracing for something and keep that throughout the entire movement. It's gonna help support your spine and of course your lower back. So shoulders back, chest out, nice inner abdominal pressure here, and then you'll go into your movement, right? So that'll be down and moving to the front. Now if you notice, my eyes are remaining on the camera here, and that's exactly how I will do my deadlift as well. So once I add weight to this movement, I got my feet hip width apart, I'm gonna set my posture, I'm gonna come down, keeping my eyes up, and then I'm gonna pull with the backs of my legs and my hamstrings to come up to the top. Okay, so you might notice I'm just coming down to about just under my knees right now, and that's okay. You'll play with this range of motion to see what's best for you. So here, I'm gonna set up, I'm ready to go. I'm gonna come down, I'm gonna press through my heels, and I'm just gonna squeeze with the backs of my legs to come up. So again, down, backs nice and flat, squeeze with the backs of the legs to come up. So you've probably at some point in this journey heard people talk about the mind-muscle connection. And this is certainly one of those movements where it's very important to think about how you are moving your body and what muscles you are contracting to initiate that movement. So here I want you to think about pulling with the backs of the legs, squeezing those hamstrings, squeezing those glutes to return to center position. Now there's some other variations that we can do for this one as well. Let's check those ones out right now. Now again, it's really important to make sure that you're not moving too heavy when you choose your weight. So if this is a new movement to you, the mechanics are what's going to be the most important. You can widen that base, get a little bit more of a bend in your knee, again pressing through the backs of the legs to return to standing here. So nice flat back, eyes are up, head remains in the same position, core is strong, and we're squeezing to come up from the side, just a little bit more wide, down, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Inhale, exhale to come all the way up to standing. So you can do some things with this. You can even widen it to do a sumo deadlift. At this point, what I want you to focus on is just the mechanics. Nice posture, shoulders are back, almost feeling like you're pinching those shoulder blades together. You've got that firm intra-abdominal pressure here to create the support for the spine. That's going to be the most important part of this entire movement. All right, you're still with me, so let's talk about lunges. There are, like any of the other movements that we've talked about, which is so great, there's a variety of ways that you can do them, some with different benefits. So there are front lunges, rear lunges, side lunges, curtsy lunges, weighted lunges, isolated lunges. There are a ton of different ways, but let's again just go right into the form and figure out what is best for you. You want to think about when you're doing a lunge, no matter if you're going forward or backward, about where the hips are. We don't want to cross over and have some twisting motion through our lower body. So you're going to begin with your feet in hip width position, and if you're stepping forward to do your lunge, you're going to step forward, press back to come back to standing, okay? Nice tall posture, press forward, come back to standing. I'm not going to come down and come way out here, okay? From the side, that would look like coming way out over your toe. We're not going to do that. When you're doing a forward lunge, you want to just think about stepping forward, coming straight down to the ground, using that glute and hamstring, stabilizing with the hips pointed forward and pressing to come back, okay? Now if we're going to do that on the other side for a rear lunge, what we're going to do, again, hips are forward, feet are hip width apart. We're going to step back and forward, back and forward, okay? So we're thinking about where the knees are, just as we do with our squats. When we're in a lunge position, we want to make sure we're not coming in here or out here. You might have moments of instability or feeling like you're a little off center, and that's okay, because this motion coming off center and having to work on balance is also going to help stabilize the small supporting muscles that help the big muscles move. So this is really important for working on balance. If you need to, you can grab something like this and you can do your lunges this way for a little bit of added support. Maybe also if you're somebody who has had knee issues, you can use a support. You can also use TRX straps. You could use a wall if you needed to, and just think about that base of support, the structure, your posture, and then coming right back up. The other wonderful thing about lunges is that you can really modify your range of motion. So if you're coming back from a hip injury or a surgery or a knee issue, once you've been cleared from your doctor, just make sure that you're starting with a range of motion that's comfortable for you and doing that on both sides. If you have no restrictions on your right side, so you're doing full range of motion, but on your left, you are restricted, so you're doing quarter reps or half reps, you're going to create a little bit more of an imbalance. So just try to mirror what you do on one side on the other side. So it would look like, so if you're doing a rear lunge here and you're only a quarter rep, you can challenge yourself just by doing that. Maybe you're going to go into a half rep, and that's okay too. Or maybe you can come and all the way down and then come all the way up. Really, like anything else, make sure that you're just playing around with your body's best movements. That's always going to be the best thing. Now for side lunges, we can come out to the side, come back and up, right? Come back and up. So we're not getting lazy on that side. We're really holding strong to that momentum. We're not getting sloppy. We're not getting too tired. We're gonna support, and when we come away, we're gonna push the ground away. Okay, so thinking about pushing the ground to return to your starting position. If this is a challenging move for you, and it is for many, what you can do is keep it stationary. You can even start here, and you can go back and forth, right? Kind of just challenging, warming up the body, leaving one side straight and bending the other, okay? So you can do it that way. Again, we're keeping a nice solid posture, and all of the time we're thinking about keeping the core strong, because that supports the number one thing in our body that's gonna keep us going, and that's our spine. So just as important, if not more so, than the training and the physical aspect is the recovery and repair process. So proper nutrition, getting enough protein in our diet, and allowing rest time is going to be the number one way for your body to actually make the gains that you're after. Whether you are trying to build muscle, if you're trying to put on some muscle size, if you are trying to get lean, if you're trying to lose overall body fat, the number one way you can allow your body to reap the benefits of these changes is to repair and recover. So downtime is very important. It's also good for your overall health, mobility, and long-term capabilities in the mountains, kayaking, biking, playing in the yard, running with your dog, whatever it looks like, to keep the lower body mobile. And we'll do that through stretching, range of motion, and work of that nature. So if you're somebody who tends to have back issues or lower back pain or back spasms, it's really important to think about what the hips are doing. So anything, you can have back problems because of ankle immobility. There's just a lot of different ways. Our body is so intricate and well tied together. So something to think about, if you're not stretching your hamstrings out and you have really tight hamstrings, you're going to be changing what the pelvis is doing and how that's sitting, right? Because you're pulling against it. On the other side of that, if you have really tight hip flexors in the front, your pelvis could be rotating forward, causing some extra arch through your lower back. So making sure that we're opening the hips, stretching out, keeping that joint very mobile, as well as the knees and the ankles, is going to help you. So I'm going to link, just like I did last week in the upper body, I'm going to link this week to a wonderful lower body stretch and a yoga flow that you guys can incorporate. You can do it just on day 4, or you can add it in more often if you would like to. It's going to be a really good way for your body to stay healthy so that you can stay capable for doing anything that you want to do. That wraps up week 2, lower body. We've got squats, we've got deadlifts, and we've got lunges, as well as some mobility work. I will be right back here next week for week 3, and we will be talking about a whole new area. This week, just focus on what I've given you here. Play around with it, get used to these movements, and really solidify these movement patterns for yourself so that you can keep these movements and exercises in your regimen for the long term. I will see you back here sooner rather than later.